The restaurant was called L'Origin, a Michelin-starred temple of gastronomy perched on the 62nd floor of Sterling Tower. The windows looked out over the Manhattan skyline, a sea of lights glittering like scattered diamonds. The tables were set with hand-embroidered linen and crystal glasses that cost more than most people's monthly rent. The kitchen was helmed by a chef who had been trained in lion and poached from a rival establishment for a sum that had made the food press salivate. I had chosen this restaurant for our 10th anniversary. I had made the reservation 6 months in advance. I had personally selected the wine pairings and the tasting menu and the corner table with the view of the Empire State Building. I had done all of this because I still believed, after everything, that my marriage was worth celebrating. My husband, Julian Ashford, arrived 17 minutes late. He was wearing a Tom Ford tuxedo that I had paid for. His hair was freshly cut, his smile freshly polished, his apology freshly rehearsed. He kissed my cheek and slid into the chair across from me, and his eyes did not meet mine. "Sorry I'm late," he said. "The board meeting ran long. You know how it is." I knew how it was. Julian had been CEO of Ashford Biotech for 7 years, a position I had given him, a company I had founded, a laboratory I had built with my own hands and my own inheritance. He had been running the company into the ground for most of that time, but he was charming and handsome and the investors liked him, so I had stayed in the background. I had let him take the credit. I had let him take the stage, that I had let him take everything because I believed that marriage meant sharing. "How was the meeting?" I asked. "Productive. We discussed the merger with Novice Pharmaceuticals. They're very interested. The board is optimistic." He signaled the sommelier and ordered a bottle of Chateau Margaux, the most expensive wine on the menu. "Let's not talk business tonight. It's our anniversary. Let's talk about us." "Us," I repeated. 10 years, Vivian. 10 years. That's longer than most people last in this industry. Longer than most people last in this city. I think that deserves a toast. The sommelier arrived with the wine. He opened the bottle with practiced precision and poured a taste into Julian's glass. Julian swirled, sniffed, and nodded. The sommelier poured 2 glasses, set the bottle on the table, and retreated. Julian raised his glass. To 10 years. To us. To the future. I raised my glass. The wine was deep ruby, almost black in the dim light. I swirled it, watching the legs run down the crystal. I lifted it to my lips. And stopped. The smell was wrong. Faint, almost imperceptible under the wine's natural bouquet, but there, a hint of something bitter, something chemical, something that didn't belong. I lowered the glass. "Julian, what did you put in my wine?" His face went very still. "What are you talking about?" "The wine. It smells off. What did you put in it?" "I didn't put anything in it. You're being paranoid." Paranoid, that was what he always called me. Paranoid when I questioned the missing funds in the company's accounts. Paranoid when I asked why he was spending so many late nights at the office. Paranoid when I found the hotel receipt in his jacket pocket, the one with 2 names on it, his, and a woman I had never heard of. I reached into my purse and pulled out a small plastic bag. Inside it was a strip of test paper, a chemical analysis strip from the lab I still maintained. Despite Julian's insistence that I didn't need it anymore, I dipped the strip into the wine glass. The paper changed color, from white to pale blue. "Cyanide." "You are going to kill me," I said. My voice was calm. I was surprised by how calm. Julian's mask slipped. The charming smile vanished, replaced by something cold and reptilian. "How long have you known?" "About the cyanide just now, about the affair 6 months, about the embezzlement 8 months, about the plan to have me declared incompetent and institutionalized." "I found out about that 3 months ago. You're not as subtle as you think. Julian, you never were." He stared at me for a long moment. Then he laughed, a cold, humorless sound. "Fine, you know that IT doesn't change anything. I've already transferred the company's assets. I've already filed the divorce papers. I've already spoken to the doctors. By morning, you'll be in a psychiatric facility, and I'll be the sole owner of Ashford Biotech. The only question is whether you go there alive or in a body bag." "You think you've transferred the assets?" "I know I have. I'm the CEO. I have signing authority on every account." "You have signing authority on the operating accounts. The holding company is structured differently. The intellectual property, the patents, the formulas, the research belongs to a separate entity. One you don't control, one you've never controlled." His eyes narrowed. What separate entity? The Vance Family Trust, my grandmother's trust, the one I've been quietly transferring assets into for the past 8 months. Ever since I realized what you were doing, you own the shell, Julian. I own the substance. You've been CEO of an empty company for almost a year. The color drained from his face. You're lying. I'm not. I pulled out my phone and pressed a button. But you don't have to take my word for it. The doors of the private dining room opened. A woman in a perfectly cut charcoal suit strode in, flanked by 4 attorneys and a security detail. She was 60 years old, silver-haired, with the unshakable authority of someone who had spent 3 decades in the highest echelons of corporate power. Her name was Margaret Chin. She was the CEO of Chin Capital. She was also the chairwoman of the Vance Family Trust, and she had known me since I was a child. Madam Chairman, Margaret said, her voice cutting through the silence. The documentation has been reviewed. The attempted asset theft has been flagged. The fraudulent divorce papers have been voided. And the police are waiting downstairs for your instructions. Julian shot to his feet. What is this? Who are you? I'm the woman who has been protecting Vivian's interests since before you met her, Margaret said. And you, Mr. Ashford, are under arrest for attempted murder, fraud, and conspiracy. The cyanide you purchased from a front company in Delaware left a very clear paper trail. S.O. did the payments to the doctors you tried to bribe. So did the offshore accounts where you've been hiding the company's money. You can't prove any of that. We already have. Margaret gestured toward the door. The FBI is waiting in the lobby. Shall we? Julian turned to me, his face a mask of desperation and fury. Vivian, please, we can fix this. I made a mistake, a terrible mistake, but I love you. I've always loved you. 10 years. 10 years can't end like this. 10 years ended the moment you put poison in my glass, I said. 10 years ended the moment you decided I was worth more dead than alive. 10 years ended when you chose greed over love. And now you're going to spend the next 10 years in a prison cell thinking about what you threw away. Please, take him away. The FBI agents entered and took Julian by the arms. He struggled, shouting my name, but they held him firm. As they dragged him toward the door, he twisted around one last time. You'll regret this. You'll regret this, Vivian. I made you. Without me, you're nothing. No, I said quietly. Without you, I'm everything. The doors closed behind him. The room fell silent. I stood alone at the table, the poisoned wine still sitting in my glass, the city lights still glittering beyond the windows. Margaret touched my elbow. Are you all right? I will be. I looked at the wine. He was going to kill me. He sat across from me at our anniversary dinner, and he was going to kill me. But he didn't. You stopped him. You've been stopping him for 8 months without knowing it. Now he's going to prison, and you're free. Free. The word felt strange. I had been married for 10 years. I had been in love for longer than that. And now it was over. Not with a whimper, but with an arrest, a confession, and a glass of poisoned wine. What happens now? I asked. Now you take back your company. You take back your legacy. And you start living the life you should have been living all along. Margaret walked me out of the restaurant, past the stunned waitstaff, past the whispering diners who had seen the FBI agents and were already speculating about what had happened. We took the private elevator down to the lobby, where a black Maybach was waiting. As we drove through the streets of Manhattan, I looked out at the city I had grown up in, the city where I'd built my company, the city where I'd fallen in love and been betrayed and survived. I was still breathing. I was still here. And tomorrow I would start again. The trial of Julian Ashford was swift and brutal. The evidence was overwhelming. The cyanide purchase, the bribed doctors, the offshore accounts. The affair with his executive assistant, a woman named Sabine Morrow, who testified against him in exchange for immunity. Julian was convicted on all charges: attempted murder, fraud, embezzlement, and conspiracy. He was sentenced to 25 years in federal prison. Sabine Morrow was exposed as his accomplice. She had helped him set up the shell companies and the offshore accounts. She had known about the plan to poison me and had done nothing to stop it. Her immunity deal saved her from prison, but her career was destroyed. The last I heard, she was living in a rundown apartment in Queens, working as a telemarketer, her former life as an executive assistant a distant, bitter memory. Ashford Biotech was dissolved. The shell company Julian had created was worthless, but the real company, The one I had founded, the one I had protected, continued under a new name, Vance Therapeutics. I took back the CEO title, that I took back the laboratory, that I took back everything that had been stolen from me, piece by piece. The first year was the hardest. I had to rebuild the company while testifying in court, managing the press, and trying to remember who I was without the man who had defined my life for a decade. I went to therapy, that I went on long walks in Central Park, that I learned to cook badly, that I learned to be alone well. The second year was better. Vance Therapeutics released its first new drug, a cancer treatment that had been stalled for years under Julian's mismanagement. It received FDA approval in record time and was projected to save thousands of lives. The company's stock price soared. I was profiled in Forbes, Fortune, and the New York Times. They called me a survivor. They called me a hero, that I called myself busy. The third year was transformative. I met a man at a pharmaceutical conference in Geneva. He was tall, silver-haired, with the quiet intensity of someone who had spent his life building things and the unexpected warmth of someone who had never forgotten where he came from. His name was Adrian Sterling. He was the CEO of Sterling Global, the largest investment conglomerate in the world, and he had been trying to get a meeting with me for 2 years. "Ms. Vance," he said, extending his hand, "I've followed your story. I've followed your company. And I think you and I are going to build something extraordinary together." I took his hand. "I'm listening." What followed was a partnership, first business, then personal. Sterling Global and Vance Therapeutics merged their research divisions, creating the largest pharmaceutical conglomerate in North America. Adrian and I spent long hours in boardrooms and longer hours on video calls, arguing about strategy and celebrating breakthroughs. Somewhere in the middle of it, we fell in love. He proposed on the rooftop of Sterling Tower, the same building where my old life had ended, the same building where my new life had begun. I said yes before he finished the question. We were married 6 months later, in a small ceremony at my family's estate in the Hudson Valley. Margaret Shen was my matron of honor. The guests included senators, CEOs, and the FDA commissioner who had fast-tracked our cancer drug. My mother's photograph sat in the front row, beside a bouquet of white roses. On our wedding night, Adrian asked me why I had trusted him after everything I had survived. "Because you never tried to take anything from me," I said. "You never asked me to step aside. You never told me my ambition was unfeminine. You never made me feel like I had to choose between being loved and being powerful. You saw the woman who had fought for everything she had, and you loved her. Not in spite of her strength, but because of it. I loved you the moment I saw you," he said. "At that conference in Geneva, standing at the podium, presenting your cancer drug, you are the most commanding person in the room, that I thought, that's her. That's the woman I've been waiting for my entire life. And now I get to spend the rest of my life being worthy of you." I kissed him, and I thought about the woman I had been, the one who had married Julian Ashford, trusted him, loved him, and nearly died because of it. She had been naive, but she had also been strong. Strong enough to survive, strong enough to rebuild, strong enough to love again. 10 years after that anniversary dinner, I stood on the rooftop of Vance Tower, looking out at the Manhattan skyline. MY company was thriving. MY marriage was strong. MY legacy was secure. My husband was beside me, his arm around my waist, his presence a quiet reassurance. Somewhere, Julian Ashford was sitting in a federal prison, counting the years. Somewhere, Sabine Moreau was living a life of quiet desperation. And I was here, alive, free, victorious. Not because I was lucky, not because I was cruel, but because I had finally learned that the woman they tried to kill was the woman who would bury them. And I was just getting started.